Hello and welcome to the Fiction Nonfiction Podcast from Literary Hub, where we believe that every issue in your social media feed or on the evening news has already been tackled somewhere in literature. I'm Whitney Terrell, author of the novel The Good Lieutenant.
And I'm Vivi Ganeshananthan, also known as Sugi, author of the novel Brotherless Night. So do you follow the Pope on social media?
Well, there's an interesting sentence that I don't usually hear. No, I do not. I do not follow the Pope or really any other religious figures on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, or Instagram or anywhere else. Should I be doing that?
I remember back when the tweet of God on Twitter used to be really popular.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know, like the Pope.
That's different.
I kind of liked tweet of God. The Pope's from Chicago, so I kind of feel like it's as if Studs Terkel became Pope, or Nelson Algren, or Stuart Dybek, or Richard Ryder, and even a number of Chicago writers who have spoken out against injustice and stood up for this disadvantage. Except for, in this case, the Pope is in a position of global power, which is rarely the case for writers.
So he probably, I mean, I wonder what his reach is. I would suppose that on X, Elon's throttling him, but never mind. Let me move on. I wonder if does he have a verified account? Is he paying? Do you know?
I have no idea. Does he have a Truth Social account? Is he using Threads?
I don't know. Anyway, Robert Francis Prevost, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, born in 1955 in Chicago, Illinois, and a White Sox fan. Speaking of being a fan of the downtrodden. So why do you think this Pope... I'm sorry. Well, them and the Twins, pretty downtrodden in the American League Central, in my personal view. Although the Royals are in last place right now. So, why did he take Leo as his Pope name, I mean, that's a Detroit team. He could have done, like, Ursus, at least, or something like that.
Well, actually, traditionally... Deep cut for the Latin-speaking listeners.
There's not really Latin for White Sox that I could think of.
Anyway, traditionally, pontifical Leos have been heavy advocates of human rights. So maybe, just maybe, this Pope was not thinking about sports when choosing his name?
Well, we're going to find out an answer to that question and talk about the influence that this American Pope is already having on contemporary American politics, including his dust-up with President Trump over our war in Iran. And to help us, we're going to talk to Liam Callanan. Liam is the award-winning author of the novels Cloud Atlas, Paris by the Book, and All Saints. His nonfiction debut, Stone Age Astronaut, is coming out in September. But he's here to talk to us about his 2023 novel, When in Rome, which follows the life of a former nun, Claire Murphy, and describes a struggling convent in Rome. His work has been published in the Wall Street Journal, Esquire, Slate, and the New York Times, the Washington Post Magazine, and San Francisco Chronicle, among other places. He teaches writing at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Liam, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
All right, so we're going to start at the beginning, I guess. I don't know. With the Pope, it's kind of hard to start at the beginning of anything. But you know Sugi, I don't know you, and neither do our listeners. So you are Catholic. Your novels often deal with faith in one way or the other. And so how did you feel when the new Pope Leo was chosen to succeed Pope Francis on May 8th of last year?
Total shock. I mean, I was expecting to be chosen one of these times, and apparently it's not going to happen this time around either. But no, I was surprised, actually, because there was a cardinal from the Philippines that I thought was bound to win. And I thought it was definitely going to be someone from the global south. So I was surprised as anyone else that it was someone from America. And I was a little bit leery at first. I was like, really, an American Pope? But then I found out he was from Southside Chicago, a White Sox fan. In other words, someone very much in the mold of my Irish Catholic grandmother, who probably passed him at one point or another on the way to the Sox field. And so once I knew that, I knew we were in good hands. I will say, like, his being American, though, did make me a little bit leery of, like, is this going to be an inevitable collision path with American politics? And sure enough.
Do you think he was chosen for that reason? Like, I've heard people speculate that he was like a Trump. I was going to say that Trump prophylactic, but I don't know if that's exactly the right term. But a way of having the church have a way of talking to or dealing with Trump.
I've heard that too. I've heard that actually. I think the president even said that. My thought is that
The president said it, that is probably wrong.
right. And so my thought is that I don't think so. I think they chose him because he again was from the global South. I mean, he's from Chicago, South Side Chicago, but he's also from the Southern Hemisphere, and that he ministered for a long time in Peru. He has Peruvian citizenship. He speaks Spanish. His first words to the people when he was elected Pope, and his first words as Pope, were in Spanish. So I think they were really looking to someone with missionary fervor who was out there and understood the plight of refugees and people from around the world in a way that perhaps the most recent popes, well, I guess Francis was also, this is following in the footsteps of Francis in that respect. So that's my sense. I don't really think the Vatican was very focused on the United States.
So we are going to talk about Pope Leo's most recent conflict with President Trump over the war in Iran. We're always going to get to President Trump sometime. Although, to be honest, in this case, the conflict seems to be all in Trump's end. But before we get to that, I am curious about how popular Pope Leo is outside the U.S. Do Italian Catholics like him? Given his history as a missionary doing work in the global South, as you're mentioning, does he have global popularity, and did he kind of have a strong reputation prior to this? Do they approve of his selection?
I think that he is. I saw one poll that said he's the most popular figure worldwide. I don't know exactly how you take a poll like that, but Gallup did, and he placed right up there. I think that he's also popular with American Catholics. He's not like a movie idol, I wouldn't say, or like someone who you would expect to do. He's very unassuming. He's a very vulnerable leader. And I mean that in a good way. So you don't expect him to dominate the spotlight. But I think in part that's what's made him popular: his accessibility, his humility, and how he approaches situations. So, and for American Catholics, he's definitely done things that cater to the full spectrum. So progressive Catholics, conservative Catholics, they've each had something to take away from what he's talked and done so far as Pope that makes them feel comfortable with him as Pope.
We've had a few instances. I mean, before we get onto the Iran stuff, I mean, like, people are going over to meet with him. David Axelrod was there recently. Didn't J.D. Vance go and meet with this current pope, or was it Francis that he met with right before he died? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, so it's definitely the conspiracy theorists are onto that one.
Yeah. So what is it like? You say he's accessible. Like, what is it like to be near a pope? Like, I mean, how do you meet them? Have you ever met a pope?
Funny you should ask, Whitney. So this was when I was going around with this book, when in Rome, I had, when the paperback was out, I had the surreal experience of, in fact, getting to go to the Vatican. Pope Francis, near the end of his papacy, had a series of events where he was bringing in communities of people, artists, I think comedians at one point, writers and filmmakers, were all coming in, and he was having audiences with each of them for some give and take. And so through many magic gyrations of the Holy Spirit, I found myself in the Sala Clementina, one of the large reception rooms in the Vatican, with a delegation from around the world, from Poland, from Nigeria, from Canada, from Britain, and from the United States. And there were several of us authors there. And then also, somewhat randomly, Martin Scorsese. Okay. It was more difficult to get to meet Martin Scorsese than it was the Pope. But then, and he gave us a wonderful talk. He used to teach high school literature. And he really gave us, he did this close reading of Tolstoy, a little passage from Tolstoy, and talked about how we needed to not necessarily stay in our lane, like we needed to overwhelm the banks of what we had marked out for ourselves. So it's really lovely. And then we got to go up one by one and greet him. And in my case, I gave him a copy of When in Rome because I thought he might need a little light reading. And he received it with great glee. He was one of those people, and I don't know too many people like this, but he was instantly I thought, oh, he knows me. There might be 1 million people here. There may be 1.5 billion Catholics in the world, but like he really sees me. Like it was clear that he had a very kind of magnetic attraction, personality like that, and so it was a lovely experience. And then we went back, and he said a few more words, and then off he went. And I thought, did that just happen? It was surreal. So it was like visiting the 16th century, because there we were in a castle, complete with a ramp that we had to get up to the second floor, which was about 5 floors up. And we went up this ramp, which apparently was like 16th century ADA ramp. Like it was so your donkey could take you up to the second floor. So it was a wide path with little stairs every 4 or 5 feet going up. And it was just the most surreal experience. So, and as part of that, I just got a sense of what it's like I can't say I got a sense to say what it's like to be Pope, but you definitely got a sense you're in the midst of all this grandeur. The Sistine Chapel is just downstairs. You're living in a palace, although in his case, very famously, he was living in very humble lodgings. But you're in this kind of magical spot, and it can seem like you are, it's hard not to see yourself as part of a larger narrative, shall we say.
So he, I don't know, had some kind of it factor then. I mean, you knew like, okay, this is why, there's a reason why this guy's Pope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like he really, and he had like, he had the sense, he had an eye for wit, I think, and or had an ear for wit, and he was a very funny in person, and funny just to be. He was off the cuff remarks were very humorous, and he was just playing things by ear quite a bit. And so I really enjoyed my time with him. Again, it was 30 seconds, so it wasn't like the most extraordinary amount of time either. But I was like, oh, if I come back, like he will clearly see me in the crowd and call me up and say, here, could you tell me what happened on page 4? When he took the book, he was like, Rome. And that was the conversation that we had. And I said, Rome. And so we crossed the language barrier just like that. And it was quite magical in that regard. And then he started flipping through it, much to the angst of his handlers, who were like, we need to keep this moving along. And he was like, look at page 150. And I was like, and I said, well, there's a cameo in the book where my main character runs laps around St. Peter's Square in the middle of the night. And so I was in the midst of a conversation about, well, this is how that all works out, when in fact, I had to then give up my time in front of the papal throne and go back to my seat.
I am just curious. I mean, how do you get invited to meet the Pope? I mean, he's not like sliding into your DM. So how does the papal invitation appear?
In my case, it was like you knew someone who knew someone who knew someone. And so I think it was Catholic writers they're not few and far between, but they kind of are few and far between. And so when they were assembling this delegation of writers, they got all the usual suspects and then me. So I'm not sure exactly how. I knew some people. There's conferences I've been to, and some of the people at those conferences were involved in organizing this delegation, and they were trying to recruit a cross selection of people who had books freshly out that might have some relevance. And so it just happened to be. I was going to say kismet, but that's not a very Catholic word. But it just happened to be the right assembly of events. So it wasn't like they put out a call for Catholics. Just one day someone called up and said, so Liam, this book about Rome, is there any chance you're free in June? And I was like, yeah, sure, I can come June. And, or actually it was late May. I know that because, and I'll tell this one story and then we can get on to the rest of the interview. But so it was late May, and my youngest, who was a senior in high school at the time, at Catholic high school, she's like, you're going to Rome to meet the Pope? Like, can I be your +1? And I was like, there's no +1. You're not coming to see the Pope. And she said, and I said, besides, you have final exams. Like, you can't abandon your finals just because you're going to Rome. And she said, Dad, it's like a long-standing half joke, half not at my high school that if you have a note from the Pope, you can get out of an exam. The teacher's always like, you have to take this exam unless you have a note from the Pope. So when I went to Rome, after I gave Pope Francis the book, a friendly Jesuit priest had helped me translate a note into Italian to my daughter's teachers saying, please excuse her from her next exam, signed. And then I said to Pope Francis, I said, so if this is good with you, could you sign this note? And he's like, and the translator leaned in and the papal footman leaned in. And then Pope Francis just put up a hand like, give me the pen. And so I'm looking at it right now. It's hanging up in my office. She never actually used her get out of jail free card, but I just thought that was wonderful. It showed, his sense of humor and also just his openness to conversation and interaction with people of all ages. So,
and that's Pope Francis. One group does not appear, however, to be charmed, at least by our current pope or popes that have papal humor, openness, wisecracking, or letting anyone out of exams or really doing anything much at all. That's the right wing here in America, who seems to view Pope Leo as more progressive than they would like. The woke pope, they call him, as we've all heard. But prior to this Iran thing, that was already happening. So why? I mean, what has he done, if anything, to earn this title during the past year? Is he in some significant way preaching a different gospel than Pope Francis or John Paul or any of his predecessors?
No, he's not. And I mean, I think what he's done is his job. He's preaching the gospel. He's preaching peace. He's preaching help, outreach to the downtrodden. I think he is pointing out to how Jesus preached to his disciples and to the crowds who came out to hear him, and reminding us all that these stories that are 2,000 years old are still very current for today. So people have always taken issue with papal messages and the gospel, and it's a hard path to follow. So I'm not surprised that people struggle with it. But and I don't think it was a surprise to the Pope or to anyone who preaches that people resist the more difficult parts of the gospel to follow. And so I think Leo is just an example of that. But I think it's interesting that he, for the idea that he should stay in his lane, like I think it's hard to say, like, I don't think he really believes this, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were over in the Vatican, they were like, Trump is who again? I mean, because it's a church of 1.5 billion people. He's got a church, he's got a parish in Gaza. He's got an archbishop in Tehran with thousands of Catholics spread around Iran. There's a popular metro stop in Beijing named South Church because there's a cathedral, Catholic cathedral right next to it. As I said earlier, he's a Peruvian citizen. Like, he's got a lot of things going on. And in the midst of all this, he was in Africa, and there he was speaking truth to power about preaching against corruption and preaching against people being abandoned and reminding people of the role that the church had in the transatlantic slave trade. And so he's got a lot of things. He's got a lot of souls to attend to before he even gets to the Americans. So I think part of it, he's like, I don't think he's throwing thunderbolts from on top of a mountain because he has a particular interest in taking down America. I think he's like, yes, and that too, by the way, we're a religion of peace, and peace is the message. I'll be back in a sec. Can you just hold on while I take care of this rest of the planet? And it's like, oh my God, I just was right there. So, and I don't think I notice he's not going to come for the 4th of July celebration. I don't think he was ever planning to. He was invited, but he said he's going to be down at Lampedusa with the refugees on that day. So he was already booked.
It seems to me like he just is, maybe more than preaching different gospel from previous popes, he has had more opportunities, isn't quite the right word, more chances to respond to calamitous events. You mentioned Gaza, and this past Easter, Trump threatened to attack civilian infrastructure in Iran if its government refused to open the Straits of Hormuz. And then on April 7th, he wrote quote, a whole civilization will die tonight, basically is a threat for if Iran's leaders did not do what he wanted. And on that day, Pope Leo said to the media, today, as we all know, there was this threat against the entire people of Iran, and this is truly unacceptable. It's like a pretty direct rebuke from a pope to the U.S. president. Were you surprised when you heard that?
I wasn't, in the sense that I thought that that cried out for response. And the church, the Catholic Church, is definitely one of the few institutions in the world that has seen some civilizations come and go. Like, it's been around that long. So when people start talking about tearing down a civilization, the Pope has a platform to stand on. And I think, so I wasn't surprised that he was speaking out because, again, the past four popes, like popes have come out against the Vietnam War. Pope John Paul II was lecturing Bush about the Iraq War. Pope Francis was speaking out, and now Pope Leo. Like, this is part of a chain of conversation. I think what's interesting now is that it happens so much in real time, that the time sequence between when somebody says something, like, it's not even a news cycle anymore, it's like a news minute. And so it may feel more immediate and startling for that, but I don't necessarily think it does break with previous precedent. If anything, it upholds it.
Well, let's talk about the precedent for presidents dealing with the popes, the Catholic Church in general. I mean, on April 12th, President Trump wrote a long Truth Social post. We all are getting familiar with those, that accused Pope Leo of being weak on crime, which was interesting to me, and said, Leo should get his act together as Pope, use common sense, stop catering to the radical left, and focus on being a great Pope, not a politician. What? Is there any precedent for an American president telling the Pope to get his act together?
No, not really. I don't think so. No, there's not. I think, if anything, the opposite is true. Like, when Kennedy was running for president, the great concern was that he would be beholden to the Pope, which, like, if only that were true now, like that the president was beholden to the Pope. Like, but at the time, Catholicism, Catholics, very suspicious. They were held in much suspicion, and so there was a great concern they'd be controlled by Rome. I don't think that a pope has had the opportunity to be upbraided by an American president before, in part because, again, the church has been around for 2,000 years and America's been around for 250. So there's only a limited number. I think I read somewhere that Teddy Roosevelt maybe had dust up with the Vatican when he went to Rome because there was a American Protestant community or maybe some Methodists who wanted to meet with them, and there's like a little imbroglio there, but that's a really small thing. And so I think it was startling for a lot of people that the Pope would get this advice from the president, which, again, now, I mean, the Vatican, St. Peter's Square is not the best place for pickpockets, so maybe he could be tougher on crime that way, but I don't think so. I think they're pretty strict.
Now, I'm going to edge out into some territory that is probably dangerous for me because I'm not super religious myself, and I'm Episcopalian if I were to be anything. But it seems to me that there is like maybe a part of this reason that Trump and maybe other Catholics in America are so upset is that there is a special like rise in conservative Catholicism in America. And I feel like isn't Alito Catholic? And there like you've got a lot of Catholics in the Heritage Foundation. And there's a kind of traditional Catholicism that is focused not on the things that Leo talks about, but like not liking gays and focusing on being married and that sort of stuff. Am I wrong in thinking and feeling that in the general American conservative ethos, there's a kind of traditional Catholicism that is not very progressive?
Oh, there's definitely, and I think it's become a part of the story because many name brand politicians are converting to Catholicism or making
J.D. Vance, for instance, like
right.
that's the sexy thing to do now.
Right. And so, but I think that
Did you have to say sexy after J.D. Vance?
I'm sorry.
Those Episcopalians, you never know. I think that the Pope would say, I can't speak for the Pope, obviously, but there's one church. There's many different people in the church. They come from all different walks of life. If it feels like traditional Catholics are getting their moment in the sun, maybe it's just because we haven't talked so much about or seen so much about that in the past. And so I think that that's kind of, it's interesting that that's become a focus of where you double down, but just J.D. Vance's conversion, I think 8 years ago, is probably part of this new trend, or not trend. There's a spiritual reawakening they talk about where church attendance seems to be going back up, and so that might be part of the crest of that wave. But again, like everybody should, one of the many amazing things about the Catholic Church is how universal it is. If you show up to a mass in Bogota or Winnipeg, or Tehran, it's the same mass in a local language, or under Pope Leo, there's more Latin masses being said. So there's many different people under that tent, but again, among 1/2 billion, I think there's room for everybody.
I'm also not neither Catholic nor religious. And if I were to be any, I guess I'm a Hindu atheist, which one of my professors told me I could be. But I don't know. It also seems to me that if quote unquote traditional Catholicism is on the rise, you also are seeing a response among sort of progressive Catholicism, which also has among its followers, right, people who are following the most traditional precepts of Catholicism, like serving the poor.
Right.
And like that incredible tradition of service, which is one of the things that I find most appealing in Catholicism, which is actually right, one of the most powerful faith communities in Sri Lanka. So I don't know. That's the lens through which I'm thinking about it. But we haven't actually talked at all about, right, the most recent Catholic president was Joe Biden.
Right.
I mean, what did you think about his interactions with the Vatican? Well, I'm trying to remember like what his interactions with the Vatican were. Maybe they were pretty. Did they call on him to do anything, or did he? What was their communication?
I don't know. I know I remember several of his staff went over, and I think Biden and the Pope met on more than one occasion, I believe.
I think that's right.
I think Biden represents kind of like, he's older than the current Pope, so he represents that generation of 60s, 70s Catholicism where there was a real radical transformation, like Vatican II came, which liberalized a lot of the church. And so those are people from kind of old school Catholicism that then found themselves in a new world of Catholicism after that. And so in some ways, Biden is part of that. But it's also is kind of Catholicism as culture. Like it was, in addition to belief, it was like where you went on Sunday and you had coffee and donuts afterwards, and you gave up alcohol for Lent, and you didn't eat fish on Fridays. And you're part of this larger almost casual community. And so
that's also Episcopalianism. That's how that works.
Right. And yes. And so Biden's part of that world, like a very easy, not challenging world.
It's just interesting because when you mention JFK, I just think about, like, I don't think anyone was ever like, oh, Biden will be controlled by Rome.
No.
And no one ever talked about that. And he's quite religious, from what I understand.
Yeah, no, he would roll to mass on a regular, especially when he was in his place in Delaware. He would go to the local church for mass on Sundays. He wouldn't hold himself out, but he would go.
It seems to me like, I don't know, one of the things here in Minneapolis that I have appreciated recently in terms of progressive Catholicism is, like, they shut down in response to Operation Metro Surge. There were a bunch of clergy from different faith communities that shut down MSP. And the representation of Catholic priests, there were a huge number of them. And yeah, it was kind of, I don't know, the incredible social action. I don't know. It's something that I find really impressive. Just an incredible tradition. And I want to pivot to talk about When in Rome, because it kind of reminds me of some of what we're talking about in an interesting way. Your protagonist, Claire Malone, is Catholic. And almost became a nun, was a nun, and then exited that community. But like our president, she's divorced, spends most of her life in real estate, specifically selling off properties owned by Catholic institutions so they can pay their debts. This seems like something Trump would have been happy to do, although she's nothing like him. Can you tell us a little bit about Claire and then read us a passage from the book?
Sure. Claire Sinner. I, by the way, never made the connection between her and Trump, and so I'll be changing that.
That's what we're here for, Liam.
Thank you. I'll be changing that in the next edition. She'll be a dolphin trainer. The She's in her mid-50s. She's had a life that she initially started out on a spiritual path. She was going to be in a religious community, but she didn't feel like she had the fortitude for them for a variety of reasons. Now at midlife, she finds herself fully vested in this odd job of selling off old religious properties. And then these nuns in Rome have a property that they need some special help with. She flies over and falls in love with the place and is then seriously reawakened to the prospect of perhaps going and joining this community. And then all of a sudden her old college flame shows up and she has to choose between these two paths, going back in or going off with her college flame and picking up where they left off. It's funny, when I went on a television show, local morning show, when the book came out, and I told the host, so I said, so this is big dilemma. She has to either choose to go in the convent or to run off with her college flame. And the host almost spit out her coffee. She's like, what's the dilemma? Like, old college flame. It's like, no, it's like, it's a beautiful place. Like, it's a really nice convent. It's in Rome. And she's like, yeah, old flame. So one of the opportunities for the book was trying to figure out exactly how to make it plausible and for the reader and for Claire herself as a character that this is a real dilemma for her, because it really is.
Would you read a little bit from the book for us?
I'd be happy to. If we have the time, I can just read the whole book. It's only 290 pages. Here we go. This is me asking to be counted up and edit this part out because Claire had not set out to have the job she did. Okay. Claire had not set out to have the career she did. Just months after no, that's not it. Hold on, sorry.
It's on page 5. It starts with Claire went on to sell a variety of properties over the years, and then I don't know if you need any additional setup. I think you're probably good.
No, thank you, and thank you for the people editing this for not making me seem quite as clumsy as I am. Claire went on to sell a variety of properties over the years in New York, nationwide. Some sites have been beautiful. A seminary and retreat house on the California coast, an island in Michigan, a mountaintop lodge. Other sales have been less idyllic. Old rectories and convents ridden with mold, parochial schools closed by building inspectors decades before, a church in the round with wall-to-wall carpet and maroon plaid. The buyer leveled it the day after purchase and put up prefab trailers, which he rented out for self-storage. The old parishioners had gathered around the rented chain-link fence and wept, or so Claire had been told. It could be tricky to persuade the sellers to sell, but Claire had a gift for seeing things both as they had been and as they might be, perhaps because that's often how she saw herself. She was no longer surprised that not all her clients shared this mindset. Old buildings becoming something new, a church becoming a restaurant, could scare them, especially the men, as if they sensed that they too were overdue for overhaul or demolition. The women, Claire found, scared less, were more given to panorama, always looking forward and back, never losing sight of the now. Claire tried to show her clients that life would be better when they moved. The roof wouldn't leak, the boiler wouldn't blow, the cat would stay peacefully curled in the chair instead of constantly prowling for mice. Claire helped her clients find futures, or so her pitch went.
So what is your take on Claire's pitch? I mean, is it good that she's helping sell these properties, or should she be helping to preserve them? And actually she's telling herself little lies about the value of what she's doing.
I think that's a good question. And I think that the churches, it's not her job to fill them, but I think it is the job of the people who used to be in those pews to fill. there's a local priest here in Milwaukee who, as different parishes were combining, as many urban parishes are, his message was like, I've come to open churches, not to close them. But if people don't show up, then close them they do. And so I think Claire, in some ways, is initially was caught up in this nostalgia of it, and now she's just like, it's just a business to her. And so, if anything, she has nostalgic for her faith of the past, where she would have mourned the loss of these buildings, and now she just sees them as piles of bricks and things like that. And so, like, part of the book is kind of her reawakening that, like, this isn't just any place. Like, it's not just going to be a restaurant, or if it's going to be turned over into something else, it should be something that also gives back to the community, which is a tricky play for her as she discovers in her business in the States and then also in Italy. It was interesting when I was doing this research for this book, I went across Rome to help talk with realtors and lawyers, and I wanted to find out what exactly was involved in selling an old property, that particularly one that was in religious hands. And it was funny, they would say like, well, you're going to have to do this, that, and the other thing, but you have to, but we can get this done for you in 2 months. I was like, no, I'm not actually buying a church, but I just want to know, and actually I don't want to know how to do it fast. I want to know how to do it slow. Like, what are some of the things that would jump up and be impediments to this? And they were just like, oh, you Americans. But I eventually found out plenty of bureaucracy and red tape that kind of can hold up a sale like this. And so I think as Claire fights that red tape and bureaucracy in Rome, she also gets a sense for like the passion that underlines her business. There might be something more to it than just making money, because she's made her money, and now she feels empty for having done so. And I feel like she wants to fill these old buildings, maybe not with their original purpose, but some other new purpose that, again, honors the past, but also opens the way to the future.
I was thinking a lot about that because I have my college roommate, and there's also a scene, the scenes at the beginning at her reunion, which I thought reminded me also of my college roommate, opened like an art center in a convent in Umbria, and so they dealt with a lot of these same issues. So like, trying to figure out what it would cost to buy the building and what were the rules, but the local government, they didn't know what to do with this thing, and nobody had any ideas, and so they were looking for people.
They are in a lot of cases, and you can get them for a song, but to get them wired and plumbed and to have the heat come on or for it to be warm at all, they weren't necessarily designed for comfort. A lot of the convents and castles, so you want to buy in a sunny place, and Umbria would be just fine for that, I think.
It's funny, I do sometimes get these social media ads that are like, buy this property in Italy. It's not run down at all. Things will be fine. And I'm always like, oh, click on that. Maybe that's your future. And I think
no,
not so much.
The properties that cost $1 are the ones that have like 18-inch thick walls that are just solid adobe. So to put anything, like, forget Wi-Fi going through the walls, you'd have to even get electricity in there in the first place. So Claire, but if Claire was your realtor, she would hook you up. She's very good at what she does.
So Liam, Catholicism and faith play a role in all of your novels in one way or another. And there's a very long line of Catholic writers, Flannery O'Connor, Graham Greene, Walker Percy, just to name a few, who use questions of faith and Catholic doctrine to power their work. Why has Catholicism proven to be such a literary religion? Would Claire have worked as a character if she wasn't Catholic?
She might have worked. It would have been a different book. I think this is a question that a lot of Catholic writers wrestle with, particularly the question of what makes a Catholic writer Catholic. And I like Flannery O'Connor's formulation, which was that she said, "I'm not a Catholic writer. I'm a writer who is Catholic." I think there's a lot of reasons why there's a tradition, or at least a recent tradition, of literary Catholicism. This is, and I'm not speaking ex cathedra here, like this is just me riffing on what this might mean. I think that Catholicism is very interested in consequences. And as you both know, like, consequences are amazing for a fiction writer. That's what powers a story. And so an interest in that. And then also the quality of mercy. Like, I think that's something that comes up and again, that someone has done something horrible, but it can be redeemed somehow, that there's grace in the world and that's possible and that's available to everyone. That's also such a radical idea. I think that in some ways also makes for good fiction. And then finally, and not to get too theological, there's a Catholicism is particularly interested in an emphasis on the physical and the corporeal and the real. Like when the service, the Catholic Mass, there's a belief that it's the real presence, like Jesus is really there embodied in the bread and wine. And so, and that embodiment is, again, great for a writer, because what we're trying to do on the page is bring people to life, conjure them out of nothing, and get people to really believe what it is about itself. And just that wrestling with physicality is just something so interesting. I mean, for example, just to make my own personal confession, given the theme, that seems like it's a good time to do it. In the past several years, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So if I've been a little wobbly on screen today, that's where that comes from. And I find that writing out of my own body, awareness of my body, its limitations, has been fascinating for me to see what that's like through a Catholic lens. And it puts me in tune with like my characters, even the ones that I'm working on in work now. It's not so much that I'm thinking about them as ethereal creatures. I'm thinking about them like even the ones, who don't suffer from any sort of neurodegenerative disease. They're really there and I can feel them. And I think that's partly, for me at least, that's fueled by Catholicism. I think there's many different ways to put things down on a page. Obviously, there's many different writers, but I think those are some of the things that come to mind for me.
That's such an incredible answer.
And Parkinson's, so I'm sorry to hear that. I wish you the best.
Thank you.
I want to echo that and also say, you're talking about this. I mean, that's an incredible answer, and so meaningful. And also you're talking about it in terms of fiction, and you've been a fiction writer.
Yeah.
And you're about to publish your nonfiction debut. Can you tell us a little bit about that book before you sign off with us?
I'd be happy to. It is my first nonfiction book, so I'm pleased to be on the nonfiction podcast to talk about it. It's about the first guy to fly to Hawaii, who flew at roughly the same time that Lindbergh flew to France. But no one remembers the guy who flew to Hawaii, even though Hawaii, much smaller target than Europe. And some people think it's a more technically challenging flight. But it was an amazing story, and it almost didn't come off, and he had an amazing career afterwards until he, like Claire, turned about 50, 52, and suddenly quit everything and became a priest. So it keeps in mind with my general theme of crossing oceans to find spiritual stories. I hope people tune in. It's going to be out September 1st, and next year is the 100th anniversary of the flight.
Liam, thank you so much for joining us today. Listeners, please be sure to pick up a copy of When in Rome at an independent bookstore near you.
And you can look for Stone Age Astronaut in September. Thank you so much, Liam.
Thank you so much. It's great being on.